That was the opening statement in the State versus Lott. Now, obviously, there's no such thing as a good murder case. You never want to see anyone get killed. But it's especially hard when you hear about two teenagers, 13, preteen, really, in a car getting shot. One is killed, the other's injured. Just a horrific crime. So I want to analyze this trial with our special guest, New York City Public Defender, Brian Buckmire. Thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
So tell me a little bit about, in this case, there was gunfire, one victim was killed, the other victim was injured. How compelling do you expect, as a public defender, a victim who survives testimony to be?
I think that's one of the most compelling cases that you can have. Oftentimes people say, and people go back and forth, whether a murder case or an attempted murder case is the hardest. Because with a murder case, you don't have the victim testifying. No one's going to get up on the stand and say, this person killed me. In an attempted murder, you always have this person that can testify, but at least it wasn't a murder. In this case, you have a bit of both, and for the defense attorney, the worst of both, where a tragedy occurred and a young girl lost her life, and you have an eyewitness there who's going to testify to the horrific incidents that happened and how she lived it. This is going to be a very difficult case as a defense attorney.
All right, so we're going to hear directly from her. Now, one of the other questions I want to ask you is about the actual strategy of the prosecution. In these types of cases, I assume that victim who survived is always going to testify. Is that a good rule of thumb or not?
That they're always going to testify? If you can secure your witness and know that the person's going to come and testify, then I think you can commit to that. The person's going to testify. You can commit to the information that that's going to come in later on in the trial.
All right, so we're going to hear from the victim next, so I certainly want everyone to come back and watch after a short break in a minute. But in the meantime, the other piece of this is they were victims that weren't doing anything. They weren't engaged in any criminal activity. Now, that should never really make a difference because murder is murder. But is it a more compelling story for a jury to convict because they were innocent? They were 13. They weren't doing anything wrong, and they were shot.
Absolutely. When people argue, and we're taught in law school and even before that, you're taught to argue the logic, the emotion, and also the, the logic and the emotion of it. So logically, you're right. It should be the same. Always murder is murder. But that emotional aspect of it being children, them being innocent, them being school kids, it adds a lot to it and definitely leans towards conviction.
All right. Thank you so much. We're going to have more expert analysis from Brian, who's here with us today. Very happy to have him on this for this trial. Again, two victims, one deceased, the other is going to testify. You will not want to miss what she has to say. 13 at the time this incident occurred. So please come back after this short break.
And then when the window was down and you saw this brown-haired, shaggy Caucasian male, did you see anything else that unusual from the vehicle?
No, ma'am.
Okay. And did you ever see any type of firearm or weapon?
No, ma'am, not at that time.
Did you ever see a weapon in the vehicle?
Not when it pulled up, no.
And so once it pulled up, you saw the person and it stopped. What is the next thing you remember?
I remember he stopped and we all kind of just like stopped walking. Mm-hmm. And I was paying attention to him and I was looking at him and like he looked up at me and we made eye contact for a few seconds and then he turned and like he got his weapon and he pointed it at me. So like I was kind of turned this way to move.
Okay, to your right?
To my right.
Okay.
And I was trying to reach for Kyra so she can move because I didn't know what was going on. And like he pointed it at me, and as I was moving, I got hit, and like I thought I got hit in the middle of my chest, mm-hmm. and I couldn't breathe. And Kyra was asking if I was okay, and like I couldn't speak, and I was waving at her to go, mm-hmm. and kind of like motioning for everybody else to move. And we all turned to leave, and I was hearing shots firing over and over, and I was wondering why like we weren't getting hit anymore. Mm-hmm. I thought everyone was there. And like after everything, all this, like no, there were no more shots, and like we stopped running, and we all turned, and like the car was gone. And I was kind of making head counts, and like I didn't see Lauren anywhere. So I was walking over to the dumpster, and I had to sit down because I couldn't keep standing. And as I was...
Really hard testimony to hear. She testified she actually made contact with the shooter, saw he had a gun, felt get hit in the chest. She couldn't breathe. Brian, how can a jury not convict hearing that kind of testimony from a 13-year-old who was in the car?
No clue. And I think that's why the conviction came the way it did. Just back to what I was speaking about earlier about the 3 different ways in which you can persuade. It's logic, emotion, and ethics. And when you look at it here, there's no logic behind what occurred here. The emotion is completely with the children here who were murdered and injured, and there's no ethical reason for why this happened. So when you hear the story of this young girl recounting what happened, every bit of you just says this person is absolutely evil and he deserves whatever conviction comes. As a defense attorney, I think what the defense attorney did here was plead insanity. I think that's probably the only route that you can go, especially with the evidence as it laid out, where he testified, or what came up that he made this plan with the devil. But that testimony is very powerful.
Okay. So we also are going to hear from her about when she realized something had happened to her friend, because her testimony is, I was motioning to my friends to get out of the car, let's move. And I don't think at this point she had yet realized anything else had happened to the other people. So devil's advocate, she can say what happened to her. She made eye contact. She saw the shooter. She felt the chest wound. She may not, in fact, be able to say what happened to her friends. She was just trying to get to safety and tell her friends, get out of the car. Isn't that one possible argument by the defense?
Yeah. She's 13 years old, never experienced being in a gunfight, which most people never have. But the shock of that incident can mix up emotions, perceptions, understanding, reality. Maybe when she got hit, she was so worried about her own life that what she's relaying to the jury now is not what actually happened.
All right. As a defense attorney, if you are questioning a victim or a witness who's a juvenile, do you use a different approach or demeanor with that witness to soften your cross-examination?
Yes. What I was taught and what I tell other young attorneys is be very aware of who and what you are. I'm a 6'4" tall black guy, and if I'm going to cross-examine someone of that age and that size, I'm going to be very delicate. My size, my demeanor, the deepness of my voice might work very well for a bad cop or a cop who did something wrong, and I can come very hard and be argumentative. But with a 13-year-old girl who experienced that, you have to be extremely delicate if you're going to try to point out to any inconsistencies.
All right. We're going to listen to more of her testimony and see, does she identify when or how she realized that her friend had been shot?
Near the dumpsters, Kyra, I still didn't know if it was real or not, and like I was feeling my blood run down my chest, down my stomach, and Kyra was asking if it was a joke, like she wanted it to be, because she was freaking out, and one of the 7th or 6th graders came up to me, and she was like, no, that's blood, that's real, and that's when I was really starting to look for my friend, and like I turned, and all I saw was her legs, and she was laying on the floor, and I was screaming her name, and she wasn't responding. So that's when I got out my phone to call my mom, because I wanted to tell her my friend was hurt. So I was calling her, and it wasn't going through. And then her call kind of like overrided mine, so I answered, and I was telling her that Lauren got shot, and she couldn't hear me. And I was telling her, I told her about 2 more times, and she still didn't hear me. And then I said I got shot, and she heard me, and like I was hearing her run, and she was telling me not to move, and I was kind of like I was scared because like my friend, I wanted her to get here quick, and like I was walking, I didn't want to go over to her because I thought I would make it worse than she already was. So I kept my distance, and that's when a man jumped over the fence, and he came over to me and he was telling me to sit down, and 2 nurses came up, and she was tan and she had black hair, and she took the phone from me to talk to my mom, and she went over to another nurse in the middle near the dumpsters.
Did you think you were going to die that day?
I wasn't really worried about my state because I was still walking and like breathing. I was more worried about Lauren because she wasn't responding.
And Kayla, do you know Kody Lott?
No, ma'am.
Did Lauren ever mention Kody Lott's name?
No, ma'am.
Did any of your friends mention Kody Lott's name?
No, ma'am.
So no one knew him at that time? Do you ever think about that day?
Yes, ma'am.
How often do you think about that day?
No, sometimes it'll come up when I'm laying on my stomach or I'm doing normal activity, because since the bullet is so close to where my bra wire is, like it'll scrape it or whatever, it'll hurt. I have to adjust it, or I have to adjust how I'm laying down. And then memories kind of come up. Or I'll think about it like near the anniversary or on her birthday or my birthday.
And that was the testimony that you're hearing from Ed Staley. He was one of the investigators that entered the home where Shawn Great was staying and eventually discovered 2 decomposed bodies, one of Stacey Hicks, the other of Liz Griffith. One of the interesting things that happened in this case, if you recall, is during the trial, the defendant, Shawn Great, admitted his guilt for several of the counts that he had been charged with. And one of the reasons that was alleged that he did this, amongst other reasons, was that he had videotaped the sexual violence that he had committed towards one of the deceased and towards the living victim, and had hoped to avoid having to put that in before the jury. So I want to bring my panel in again, and I want to start with you, Brian, and ask you, we're in New York, so I've never seen anything like being able to plead guilty to a charge while you're in front of the jury. How does that help them, if anything? And is the defense looking towards, again, the next phase, which is the sentencing phase, hoping to get into some good graces with the jury?
Yes, this is amazing. I wish we had this in New York for some of the cases. What I think they're attempting to do is they plead guilty to the lesser included charges. When you have murder, lesser included would be the rape, the kidnapping, and those are just lesser charges to get lesser jail time. Obviously, the charges that don't have the death penalty to them. You plead guilty to those to ensure that the video that's going to come in on those rape allegations don't come in, because then when you go to the murder, you have the ability to say, well, this is not relevant. Like how he treated this one victim is not relevant to the murder of the 2, so don't play it. And complete what you're saying. I don't want the jury to see my client doing that and then have them to decide weeks later on what the sentencing is. I want to completely bifurcate that and hope and hope and hope that I can avoid the death penalty, which I think the ultimate goal is here.
And, you know, Mike, when we talk about decisions that are made by defendants, and I think people fail to understand that, you know, the defendant rarely is sitting there by himself. And so when he's making a decision in this case about pleading guilty, he's not making it necessarily on his own. He's making it because there's an attorney next to him saying, this may look good in front of the jury. This might be the right move to make to at least garner some ability to get a break at sentencing.
Well, I think sometimes what you hope for is the jury hears that, well, this guy pled to these charges, so he was guilty of it, but he's really fighting this charge, so maybe he's not. The only thing that's I'm troubled by here is I don't know how the prosecutors can let them plead to what they want and not say, Judge, we're not accepting this plea. There's no constitutional right to a plea bargain.
Right.
So that's interesting, too. And I think at the end of the day, you're really not avoiding much because I'm sure all those other tapes will come up at the penalty phase. So I just don't get it, quite frankly.
Sure. I think one of the arguments that was made was that he did it because he wanted the complainant to not have to go through all the emotion of, you know, having to testify in regards to the video. I'm not quite sure how that worked out since the complainant, Jane Doe, had to testify anyway. So I'm not sure that he got what he proposed to do. We're going to come back in a few minutes, and we're going to speak a little bit more about Shawn Grate. Thank you. And welcome back. We're talking about the Shawn Grate trial out of Ohio. We're first going to cut to Anthony Velez with the top crimes.
Here are today's top crime stories trending on Law&Crime.com and across the country. Authorities in Pennsylvania released surveillance camera footage of a retired Marine combat veteran stopping an armed gunman from robbing a bar. The unidentified Marine is seen on camera handing over cash to the would-be robber before he suddenly tackles the suspect. During the struggle, a shot was discharged from the gun, but no one was injured. The suspect fled the scene and remains at large. A mother and daughter duo in Florida were arrested after they reportedly landed a drone full of banned goodies on the roof of a state prison. 40-year-old Cassandra Kerr and her daughter, 22-year-old Sincetta DiDiano of Tampa, allegedly flew a drone with a payload of tobacco and cell phones to the Martin Correctional Institute in Indiantown. The special delivery was meant for their relative, who is an inmate at the prison. The pair of amateur drone pilots were arrested outside of the prison and now face charges of introducing contraband into a correctional facility. Authorities in Colorado reportedly returned to the Woodland Park home of missing Colorado pilot Kelsey Barrett to conduct a follow-up search. The 29-year-old mother disappeared on Thanksgiving and was last seen with fiancé Patrick Frazee. Investigators conducted a routine search of the 35-acre property where Frazee lives with his mother and confiscated trash Frazee was seen dumping at a waste management facility in Teller County earlier this week, as reported on Law&Crime. Frazee has not been named a suspect, but investigators believe Barrett's disappearance appears suspicious. Authorities in Iowa made an arrest on the 39th anniversary of the cold case murder of Michelle Marie Martinko thanks to advancements in DNA technology. Investigators arrested 64-year-old Jerry Lynn Burns for the 1979 fatal stabbing of 18-year-old Martinko, who was found dead in her family's car in a Cedar Rapids Mall parking lot. Burns was connected to the crime after police were able to covertly collect his DNA to make the match to DNA found at the crime scene. Burns now faces a charge of first-degree murder. Those were today's top crime stories. I'm Anthony Velez for Law&Crime.
And welcome back. I want to thank Brian Buckmire for being here and giving us your legal analysis, and we hope you come back soon. And we're going to go back into the courtroom and hear from Jane Doe. If you remember, ladies and gentlemen, Jane Doe is the person that survived the attack by Shawn Grate. She doesn't want her name used. She doesn't want her face used, so we have face shown. So we have the audio. Let's take a look.
Shawn's good on this day. Been for a walk, to the right back. How was Shawn?
Fine, I guess.
Nothing out of the ordinary?
No.
When you were done with your sandwich, what did you do?
He had said that his mother had, he'd gotten his mother and his sister had given a bag of clothes that he had for me.
Okay. Had he given you bags of clothes in the past?
Once prior.
Okay. And where was your understanding of with this bag of clothes? Where was he supposed to be?
Well, it was at his place.
Had you been discussing other topics this day?
Probably just the typical Bible and whatever.
On this particular day, did you have any Bible passages you were interested in?
Yeah, I remember, I don't know what the topics were of that day, but I remember him asking if I had an extra Bible, because he didn't have one, and he'd really like one.
Okay.
So I got him one, and yeah. I know there's passages that, I don't know, along the way or what, that I wanted to show him in the Bible.
Did he seem interested in seeing or hearing those passages?
Yeah.
Do you recall which passages?
Yeah.
So, what'd you do?
So we walked back to his place, and I just walked inside. He showed me this big bag of clothes, and he was showing me some of the stuff in there, and I said, yeah, that looks fine.
And how were these packaged?
It was like a big bag of clothes. It was like a see-through bag.
Okay, so it's a clear bag.
Yeah, a clear bag.
Of clothes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
DVDs.
Okay, so you had some DVDs. Had they, those weren't things you loaned him that day?
I think it was the day before. I think it was a Saturday that we got them.
Okay. And so on this occasion, they were already there.
Right.
So you were going to take the clothes and buy them.
Mm-hmm.
Why sit on the bed?
Because it was like the only thing right there.
Okay. And what happened?
So I was reading the Bible, and he just started taking it from me,
How?
pulling it out of my hands.
Was he seated with you?
No, he was standing.
Before he began taking the Bible out of your hands, how had he been? What was his name?
I think when I first pulled out the Bible, we just both sat down on the edge of the bed, and I was showing him the passages and reading them, and he was looking at it while I was reading it, and the Bible excites me. I mean, but I know it. I don't know if it felt like it didn't really have his attention right there, but I was gonna stop because I looked at him, and he's like, "No, I'm interested. Keep going." And so I started, reading again, I guess, and I think he'd gotten up to go to the kitchen, and I thought he was getting something to eat because I'd also given him some food. So when we were first coming back to his apartment or the house, he had food, so I thought he was just grabbing some of that food. And it was when he came back that he started pulling the Bible out of my hand.
How long would you say you had been reading before he came back?
Well, it wasn't very long at all. He was just maybe gone 15 seconds or something, or I don't know, 20 seconds.
So you weren't reading for a long period?
Oh, no.
And you're listening to the testimony of Jane Doe. Jane Doe was the surviving victim who called the police and begged them to come help her. The police arrived. They arrested Sean Great, and they recovered and found 2 dead bodies at the location. I'm here with Mike Corbonics. I can't imagine if you think about the fact that she was able to call 911 and not realize probably at the time she was even in the house that what her fate potentially was had she not had the guts or the wherewithal to get up and find that phone.
This is an amazing story. It's amazing because of the fact you'd see this in a movie and you would say, I can't believe this movie.
I have chills even talking about it.
I can't believe this movie. It's almost like you have background music as it's going.
Right.
And I mean, this is riveting. This is riveting. And you know, I've tried cases on both sides. I was a member of the sex crimes unit, they called it back then, as a prosecutor, and I've defended these cases, not of these magnitude. And it's always very difficult because as a prosecutor, you have Jane Doe in this pouring her heart out about it. Amazing story. I mean, it's just amazing she's there to testify about it.
I think one of the most, I mean, there's so many troubling things, so I can't even pick one, but one of the things that stands out to me, this is a young woman who trusted him. She had gotten to know him beforehand. He basically, in a sense, was grooming her in a way to get her back to the home. She was a religious young woman who really was completely taken off guard at the idea of anything wrong happening between her and Sean Great. And he took such advantage of this poor young girl. And I can't believe not only, you know, we talk about kind of people coming forward, but the fact that she kind of not only saved her life, potentially saved the lives of whatever other women would have come into his grasp.
That's an excellent point, and I think one of the ironic things here is he lived on the street called Covert Lane, which is exactly the way he lived.
Right.
And you know, to have the Bible torn from your hand, and then just really live in hell for the next few days, like she did, and survive it. I'm still a little reeling from it because it's an unbelievable story.
Yeah, no, you talk about that. You know, that's the summation that the prosecutor should be giving. And I know, you know, it's funny. We had talked about what the mother had said. The mother of Sean Great had said, and we quoted her. She said, "He's good looking, but the devil is good looking too." Can you imagine? That's the mother of Sean Great talking like that.
It's unbelievable, and you just wonder how this kind of sociopathic behavior could have gone on so long undetected. It's just incredible. You
know, we always go back to what the defense attorney's job is in this case, and now you have this young woman on the stand who has been through hell and back, and you have a defendant next to you you have to represent to the fullest, and you're trying to figure out what to do with regards to this woman. And I'm sure there's a part of you that wants to apologize to her. We're going to take a break, and we're going to talk about it in a few minutes. So let's take a break, and then we'll come back and talk more about the Sean Great trial. Thank you.
Yeah, he started pulling them off, and I started hearing the fabric tear, and I wanted clothes to get back into, so I took them off.
Did you want to take your clothes off?
No, but I had no option.
Was that due to the force that he had used on you?
Mm-hmm.
So what happened to your clothes?
I set them aside. I don't know.
Then what happened?
These. I can't really recall. I don't know. I mean,
at some point on the night of the 11th, were you sexually assaulted?
several times.
How were you assaulted?
In every way imaginable.
With what?
How do you mean?
Did you use fingers?
No.
His penis?
Yeah.
Where did he put his penis?
I don't know.
How often did this occur?
No.
More than once?
Yeah.
More than 5 times?
I don't know.
Was this a substantial change in Sean from what you had seen before?
Yeah.
Had you had any indication prior to September 11th at his house that he had any capability of harming you?
No. No, he always came off as a nice guy.
Had he ever made sexual advances?
No. Not atypical from the way a guy, first tries to make advances.
Okay, there's nothing overt or rude?
No.
At some point, were you tied up?
Yeah.
How many times were you tied up?
At least 3.
Where were you tied?
He would always bind my wrists, my legs at times.
To what?
Sometimes to just weird positions. Sometimes just together. Sometimes one time to the bed.
So you were tied to the bed at some point, but you were also bound without being tied to the bed. Is that correct? When you were not tied to the bed, you said you were tied in weird positions.
Yeah.
What do you do?
I don't know.
Were you able to figure out his purpose?
Something sexual.
While you were bound, did he sexually assault you?
I can't remember. I don't know.
And welcome back. That is the testimony of Jane Doe talking about the brutal, brutal assault, both sexually and otherwise, at the hands of Sean Great. I'm here with Michael Korbanix. Michael, we were talking off air about what you do as a defense attorney. You see the defense attorney sitting there next to him, and sometimes I think a defense attorney at this point just wants to lay his head down and just not do anything. But he has a client to fight for. And the question is what do you do when you know at the end of the day, or you're pretty confident that your client is going to be convicted and you have a whole other stage afterward? Do you get started now? Do you wait till then? What do you do?
Well, I think this is an important lesson for attorneys to learn, especially criminal defense attorneys who are starting out, is you need to build a trial. I mean, this case doesn't happen overnight. You have a long period of time between arrest and the trial. You should be building a relationship with your defendant, your client, and letting him let that defendant know you can be trusted, and build that relationship so you can give him advice or her advice that they'll accept. And that way you can explain to them what strategies are. I can't believe, as sick as this defendant appears to be, that he doesn't realize what's going on here. And, you don't really want to cross-examine this witness unless maybe you can show, because at the end of the day, you're there to save his life in this instance.
Sure.
This is not, he's already pled. He's 40-something years old. I'm sure he's probably looking at another 40 years just what he's pled to. So I don't really understand why they're going for the death penalty and having a jury hear this, putting this victim through it, but they've decided to go for the death penalty. So you're obligated to defend your client, but now you're going to save his life. And I think you forget about this part and only, as you said earlier, show that this guy really is sick.
Right. You know, and it's funny you say that. You know, you're building a relationship with your client, but you're building a relationship with the jury. And so, you know, we always forget about death penalty. When you start going after witnesses on cross-examination, you know, that you shouldn't be, then you sometimes lose kind of the juror's trust when you're going after the wrong person. You have to pick and choose your battles as a defense attorney and quite frankly, as a prosecutor. And I guess, you know, it comes down to kind of the question of, you know, what is the best strategy? And if the strategy when he's going to be sentenced is that he's not well, then do you want to try to make it out through these witnesses?
Well, that's an excellent point. And you choose your battles and you maintain credibility. So, you know, this event happened. There's not a consent issue. There's bruising. There's all these things. That's not a consent issue. So don't go after that. And maybe they'll listen to the things that may save this guy's life.
We'll be right back in a few minutes, and we'll continue to talk about Shawn Grate. And that is Jane Doe. She's talking to the prosecutor about the injuries she sustained at the hands of Shawn Grate and talking about how it was that she was able to eventually get away from him and make that all-important 911 call that saved her life and possibly the lives of many other women. We're now going to take a look at that 911 call and talk about it afterwards.
911, what is the address to your emergency?
4th Street, Laundromat.
What's the problem?
I've been abducted.
Who abducted you?
Shawn Grate.
Where's she at now?
Asleep.
Where's she sleeping at?
In the bedroom. Please hurry.
Does he have a weapon?
He's got a taser.
Are you tied up now?
Yeah, but I kind of freed myself. Are they on the way?
Yeah, we have officers we're sending.
Please send them up.
Hey, if you're worried, you don't have to talk. You can just set the phone down, okay? I just need to hear if the officers find you or not.
Oh, shit, I woke him up.
You just set the phone down. Okay, can you get to the door where you can see out? Huh? Can you get out of the house?
Locked.
It's locked. Are you at the door?
Yeah, I am.
She's at the door.
Come on, hurry up, get out here. Where is it?
Bedroom sleeping.
Still sleeping?
Yeah.
Okay, they have her.
He went unarmed.
Unarmed?
Yeah.
All right. Right now. Do it. Don't do that.
I have chills listening to that 911 call. I still can't believe she was able to do that. And Mike, I want to bring you in because, sometimes we hear these calls and you think that they're fake because you can't believe that she's describing being in there, that he's sleeping, that there's a taser. It's almost unreal. Like if I was the 911 operator, I wouldn't even know what to think. And the fact that they got there so fast, it's unreal to me.
I'm in shock every time I hear that. Simply the way she was but it goes to show you how in those emergent situations your mind takes over and your body does what's necessary. I mean, she was in such control and so aware, and I'm sure she was tied up for so long, she was prepared for that moment. Right. And she was very ready to, it amazed me that she used the word abducted.
Right.
Because that's like such a legal type term. And she was just so controlled and quiet that you knew she was acting like, she really acted like her life depended on it. That was all in.
You know, the fascinating thing when you think about this case is that I don't believe she knew that there were dead bodies in the house. She had no idea. She had gone there, as far as she knew, she was going to, you know, talk about the Bible with this young man, and the next thing you know, she's abducted. Imagine what happens in terms of her mindset afterwards when she finds out what she has escaped, which is basically an obvious death.
She could have been under the next pile of clothes as they were. But you see, that's something, though, the defense, as Brian spoke about earlier in the show, should focus on.
Right.
Because she didn't know there were bodies there. And it was an abandoned house, so that part of it could be that he didn't know.
Yeah, and I hear you both. Unfortunately for the defense, is that they have the defendant making a video he makes a statement where he, in a sense, gleefully admits to killing these individuals and disposing of their bodies. And so, you know, it's true that you can go down that road, but then we talk about kind of the sentencing phase where you don't want to lose the jurors by coming back to them and going, by the way, I apologize. I didn't mean to say that earlier. He's guilty. Please don't kill him for the following reasons.
Well, they have that saying in defense work, you know, any port in a storm. But it appears that this ship on the defense, there's no ports in the storm, because everywhere you go is a dead end, and it's just layer upon layer upon layer of evidence upon evidence, and the system works. I mean, a lawyer has an obligation, but you know that doesn't necessarily mean that his obligation is to skirt the rules of evidence and things of that nature.
Sure, and I think that's when we talk about the idea of, you know, being very, very gentle with this complainant, very gentle, but also trying to get out something that may support your position later, whether it be that he's mentally ill or that he just snapped, that this wasn't who he was before, you know, something that allows the jury to think he's human somewhere in there.
Well, that's the biggest point here. I mean, listen, you're playing this. If you save this human being from the death penalty, you've done your job successfully. And even if you don't, you've done the best you can. That's just the way it is.
Great, great point. We're going to take a break, and then we'll be right back. Thank you.
Now, ordinarily, would you take a blood and urine specimen from a victim as part of a safe exam?
Not always.
Okay. What triggers that?
When I do my medical history, I will ask them. I will see if they were given any kind of sedation, anything, just alcohol, whether it's anything. In Lori's case, I did have to perform a drug facilitated kit.
And why was that?
She reported that Mr. Gray gave her pills to relax her. She was too uptight.
Okay. And so that triggered some sort of urine screen?
Yes, and blood work.
And did that come back negative for any ill effects?
I do not get the results of those. I hand it to law enforcement, and then...
Okay. Now, you said that when Lori presented to you that she was rocking, crying, appeared frightened.
Yes, very.
How was her hygiene?
Poor. She had very strong body odor. It was very strong. I remember it. When I opened the door, I could just smell the odor.
And it might be different for different individuals as far as body odor goes, correct?
Yes.
But did the odor, I think you told us that she had been there, she said, since Sunday?
Correct.
And what day of the week was this that you were seeing her?
Tuesday.
Okay, so her condition as far as hygiene was concerned,
yes.
Did that appear to you to be consistent with that history of having been held since Sunday?
Yes.
Now, as far as treatment is concerned with reference sexual assault, there is always the possibility of pregnancy, correct?
Correct.
And did you discuss that and the treatment side of that potential with Lori?
Yes, I did.
And what was the outcome of that?
It's a protocol that during this exam we give, first we have to do a pregnancy test to make sure that the victim's not already pregnant. And if it comes back negative, we give a pill it's called Plan B. It's to stop the pregnancy from happening. It doesn't abort a baby that's there.
Okay. But it would block.
It would block.
It would block the sperm
from reaching the egg.
From reaching an egg.
Yes.
Okay. And was there consent from Lori to such a treatment?
Yes.
Was she concerned about the the possibility?
Yes, she was.
How concerned was she?
She had made statements to me that she was scared that he could have gotten her pregnant, and she had made statements that she didn't know if he ejaculated into her.
Okay. You also, as part of your examination, ask patients whether or not they vomited?
Yes.
What is the purpose of asking such a question?
Sometimes, for various reasons. One can be if, sorry, I'm nervous, if they were given anything that made them vomit, or just like a standard question.
Okay, but it could mean that there was some chemical given to them?
Correct, that made them nauseated.
Isn't it true that vomiting could also be a side effect of a head injury?
It could, yes.
Or it could just be some viral or
stress,
biological process that they've got an illness or.
And that was the testimony of Lisa Riley. Lisa Riley was performed a sexual assault exam on Jane Doe. And I wanted to just cut it to you, Mike Korobonics. We're about to leave. Thank you so much for being here and giving us your insight. We're going to hear from Aaron Keller in a moment or a few minutes regarding the daily debrief. Thank you.